with all this connection, we're feeling so disconnected. And part of that is because this tool is like popping up and ruining our ability to connect with each other.
Health, Psychology, and Human Nature with André Sturesson. Hey friends, hope you're having a great day. Are you following me on Instagram and Facebook? Please go to Health, Psychology and Human Nature on Instagram or Facebook, or both for that matter, to get the latest episodes, inspiration and more. Please take a pause and go there. Also, if you like the episode, please share it with a friend, family member or somebody else who you think might like it. Tchiki, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great to have you here. So you have written a book called Outsmart Your Smartphone: Conscious Tech Habits for Finding Happiness, Balance, and Connection in Real Life. So I'm eager to ask you, like, do you yourself have issues with smartphones?
I definitely struggled with it, which is in part the impetus for writing this book. I was like, I was on my phone probably the same amount as your average person, and I wanted to figure out how to not necessarily throw my phone into the ocean and get rid of it, but have a better relationship with technology. So that's kind of how I got started on this path.
Exactly. Is there like any particular things that didn't work for you before, or?
I didn't like that I needed it. It felt like I'm, waiting for someone in a restaurant or whatever. And I'm like, I have to pull my phone out. And I didn't like that feeling. And so, and mainly I was working in technology on building like apps and tools and programs and stuff to boost well-being. And I started finding that people were really struggling at implementing the strategies I was teaching because of the ways we interact with technology and because we're on our phones all the time. And so it was sort of just like all of these things started to come together. And I'm like, I think the next problem I need to solve or try to solve is this smartphone thing. And so it just all came together. Who knows how life happens?
True. Right. So you were building these apps for increasing well-being, and then you stumbled on this problem that people were they not really able to do what they were supposed to do with the apps, or?
It's a mixture of things. So like one of the problems with the apps that I am passionate about building these tools to help people build skills to boost happiness, but we know that some of the best ways to increase happiness are to be with other people and to practice kindness and gratitude and things with other people. And so people are, like, oh, I'll pull up my mindfulness app and, spend half an hour meditating, which is great and beneficial. But if we're doing that instead of spending time with other people, that's like a little bit of a problem. So, yeah, so it was just like a matter of figuring out, what actually do we need to do kind of in the digital age to promote well-being.
Okay, exactly. And then figuring out how to use our smartphones in a good way. That was your goal with this book, kind of.
Yes. Yeah. You don't have to get rid of your phone or your computer. I mean, I work remotely. There's no possible way for me to do that.
No.
But we want to use them in ways that aren't making us miserable, because the research is starting to show that they're kind of making us miserable.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about the science about that?
Yeah, it's new science, so it's not complete, and it isn't conclusive. Technology doesn't always hurt our well-being. Our smartphones don't always hurt our well-being, and social media doesn't always hurt our well-being. But we're starting to find that there are particular ways in which we use these tools that are not so good for us. One example that I think people can relate to is if you're like scrolling your wall on Facebook or social media and you see all these like awesome things your friends are doing. They're going on vacations that are beautiful and they have this like perfect romantic partner and this perfect job, and it just kind of makes us feel envious or resentful or icky, and that's not so good for our well-being. But on the flip side, if we use social media or any of our tech tools to connect with people, like maybe I have an opportunity to have a video chat with someone halfway across the world, like we're doing right now, then it actually can be good for well-being. So it sort of just came to this point where I'm like, well, we're tending to interact with technology in these ways that are not good for us. How do we figure out how to interact with technology in ways that are good for us?
Yeah, sounds great. And about the smartphone syndrome. So what would you say, like if you'd explain the smartphone syndrome, what would you say it is?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a term that I stumbled upon in researching this book. It's sort of this idea that we can't put our phones down. We're reliant on them now to, get a call for a ride or, connect with people or work. Like most of us are relying on our phones for work. And so we're in this predicament where these things are hurting our well-being, yet we can't get rid of them. And that was kind of where I came to the point of there's all these people talking about how technology is evil right now. We need to have more digital detoxes. And I don't disagree, but that's such a non-effective solution because we can't just stop using our phones. So how do we get around that? Is sort of what happened.
Yeah, exactly. You can't really take away like 4 billion smartphones, or I'm not sure how many exist, but it's hard to take them all back, right?
And if we did, where would that leave us? Like, I wouldn't be able to work.
Yeah, yeah, true. All your apps would disappear as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's not practical.
No, exactly. Yeah, but it's something that really, really have become a hot topic. You hear about this topic everywhere, I think. In the news, you listen to different types. I stumbled on an article yesterday, actually, from a researcher who done a study on this. So I think it's really something that is debated quite a lot right now.
It sure is. I definitely stumbled upon this at the right time. And I think at the moment, the conversation is technology or are our smartphones good or bad, which is like the very beginning of the conversation, because obviously they're neither. They're somewhere in the middle, or we can use them in ways that can make them good or bad. So the book really focused on more of the nuance of this than just that sort of let's just throw our phones into the ocean kind of conversation.
Yeah. That doesn't really seem like a good idea to just get rid of it forever, like.
Right.
Okay. Yes, exactly. So we still need the technology, and I was thinking about, like in general, like if you really feel like you're hijacked by your phone, and you want to like take back control of your life, what would you say? What would you say would be good examples to work with now that you've been thinking about this quite a lot?
Yeah. So I get this question or some iteration of this question every time I talk to folks, and I think it's like. It's a simple question, right? Like I want one tip tells me how to like not be on my phone so much. And I think the answer is a lot more complicated than that. So like the first question is, well, why are we on our phones so much? And then like, okay, once we figure that out, like how do we get off our phones? And then once we get off our phones, how do we like what does that feel like? And how do we not get back on them? And then how do we sort of just cope with living in this world where everyone else is on their phones and consumed by technology? And like big picture, the answer is, figuring out what our emotions are doing. Because if we we're all just like picking up our phones to create some type of emotional experience. Yeah. Maybe we're bored and we want to be entertained. Maybe we're anxious and we want to just like be distracted. So that's kind of figuring out what's going on with us and why we're even engaging in this behavior is really the first step.
Right. So why are we engaging in this?
Well, it's different for everyone. So we're like regulating our emotions.
Yeah.
So I think I like was briefly alluding to, if you're alone and you're out in public, basically on the train or, walking to work or whatever, it's just, you feel like kind of weird, right? There's some weird awkwardness to it. And you just pick up your phone to be entertained or to reduce that anxiety or whatnot. And I think that's the main thing of it.
Yeah. So that is the main thing. I was wondering also if we perhaps could take a look at some real life situations, perhaps, and see what we could do there.
Sure.
So one of the things that really seems to be a big problem is for people if they really can't get away from their phone. So if they're like they have their phone with them and they check their phone maybe a couple of hundred times a day, or at least like 50 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say? What would you say in that situation? What would you say would be like a good strategy for that person?
Well, if we first figure out like why we're doing that, that's really helpful. But we'll focus in on like exactly that situation. So if you're picking up let's say you want to have your phone all the time because like, maybe your kids are at home with a babysitter, or like your work needs to get in touch with you, or there's some sort of reason you are like, somebody might need to get in touch with me. And that's like a practical use for our phones.
Yeah.
Then it's just a matter of like, I kind of encourage people to play this little game where, you get negative points every time someone else sees you on your phone. And so then you have to be more intentional and be like, well, I want to go check my messages because there are these circumstances that might, come up. I need to be able to have my phone on. And then you have to like leave the room to go check your phone. Now, if you're doing that every 5 minutes, you're going to feel that, and you're going to see how ridiculous that seems.
Yeah.
So just like, if you don't let other people see your phone, that's like one way to start getting yourself to just check it less often, and you leave the group and go to the restroom or whatever, and that way you're not constantly just checking to see if there's something there.
Right. So one way would be to just not let other people see you with your phone.
It's just like a nice little trick.
Yeah, exactly. I was also, when I was reading about this, I was looking at a TED Talk where they also talked about like trying to figure out how much you're using your phone with an app, like I think it was called Moment or something, to really to really get a hold of like how much are you actually using your phone, and then get like kind of an epiphany from that.
Yes, and I do really like those apps, and that's important, discovering, you're like, oh my God, I'm using this thing 8 hours a day, let's say, or 4 hours a day or whatever. But what happens after that? So like, let's say we do that. Do we feel guilty that we're using our phones all the time? Like, are we using guilt to change our behavior? I don't know if that's necessarily the best approach. Or like, self-awareness is great. You're like, oh my God, I'm doing this thing a lot and I don't want to be doing this thing. But I don't know if that necessarily helps people figure out how to do it less. And so I think that's the very first step. And we have lots more steps to figure out still.
Right. But so you think that could be like one of the first steps still, or you don't like that?
No,
really?
I definitely like it. I think
you like it. Okay.
Step.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. So that is one thing, and then also playing this game that you're not seen with your phone from other people, kind of.
Yeah, it's a good way to start. But I think the bigger picture, and what I focus more on in this book, which some people like and some people don't like, is really just figuring out like, what are the reasons you're pulling out your phone in the first place? Like, usually it's an emotional reason, and so it's like, okay, if you have this anxiety about, you're like, I have to check my phone. What am I missing something? Like, that fear of missing out is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Or if you just constantly need to be entertained, it's like, well, is there something going on inside of you that you are trying to avoid, some emotions? And so a lot of the book is just figuring out, okay, well, what are these emotions you're trying to distract yourself from? And how do you deal with those so that when you do stop using your phone, you don't feel awful because you're not stuck with this stuff that you've been avoiding.
Right. So it's kind of, figuring out why you're using it. And then, so if you're using your phone, if you're anxious and you don't really feel well when you're not on your phone, then that is something that makes us.
It needs to be addressed.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So it's kind of getting to the root problem then.
Exactly. And that's sort of I do all the little activities in the book kind of alongside the reader, because I wanted to know what they felt like and if they worked. And that is what it came down to, is like, anybody can just put do a digital detox and put their phone aside. But like, what happens when you do that? And how do you how do you keep doing that? And so it's a more, we wouldn't be addicted to these things if there wasn't some sort of emotional driver.
Right. So it's both. So it's both like how you reduce your amount of time with your phone, and it's also about creating a better life when you're not using your phone.
Absolutely.
Right. So about the second part, then, like let's say that you have this fear of missing out, or you have this anxiety when you're not on your phone. Like what then? What would you suggest then?
So in the book, I talk a little bit about a few different strategies, but let's start with just mindfulness. I mean, this is where it really dives into the psychology that drives kind of all of our unhealthy behaviors. And if we're mindful, then we can, be in our bodies and just, breathe in, breathe out, and be accepting of our emotions. So I have like some small little mindfulness exercises in the book that are just like, okay, put your phone down. Just be in the moment, look around, observe, the room around you. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste, maybe? And it just brings you back into your body so that it's not so like weird and you're not dealing with all these thoughts and you're not being like pulled, hopefully, as much by your phone.
Right. Yeah. So strategy for reducing the anxiety that you're having.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, right. Okay. You were mentioning something else as well, I think. What was fear of missing out, and then it was something else, like something else you were talking about avoiding, or...
Yeah, well, the fear of missing out is, sort of the classic. I want to check my phone because, like, maybe there's some event that I'm missing, and I'm not, if I look on my social media profile, I'll see it. Or maybe there's just some joke or experience or something that's in this box that I'm not having in the present moment. But when we do that, then we're not experiencing the present moment. So we're really nowhere. And that can lead to poor well-being.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's pretty... but do you also... Because I tend to believe that one of the problems is also that the phones in themselves are addictive, or at least the applications, like social media, for example. Like that is also one of the kind of seems to be one of the root problems in this.
Yes,
what do
absolutely.
you think about that?
I don't talk much about that in the book, and it's not necessarily my area of expertise, but absolutely, yeah. There's lots of research to show that like the apps themselves are being designed to be addictive. And so while on one side, it is certainly the responsibility of sort of the technology developers to ideally not create these tools that we're addicted to. We're kind of in this predicament now where that is the reality. And so it's like the responsibility is currently on our shoulders to figure out how to deal with that.
Yeah.
And so, and like, that's kind of the point that I came to at being in the technology world myself, and creating these apps and talking to people and seeing how technology is being built to addict us, and being like, I don't know that they're ever going to change. I know that people are talking about changing, but I don't know how long that'll take. So it was sort of like, okay, well, this is up to us to just like fight back against those addictive properties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really thinking that it's really about, it really seems like it's about these two things that we mentioned before. So it's really about like, how can we avoid using our smartphones in a way that is not good for us? And then the other thing is like, how can we create a life where we don't really need to use our smartphones, and that we are having a good life anyways.
Yes.
So I was thinking also like another situation then, if we'll just talk about like decreasing, like let's say you're with a friend and you are distracted by your phone. You have your phone with you, or you're even using your phone perhaps when you are with your friend. Like what would you say to that? Are there any strategies for that?
Yeah, well, first I'll say there's research that shows that even having a phone present on the table while two people are having a conversation, like reduces the quality of that conversation. Having pulling out your phone makes the other person feel disconnected from you. And even if you pull out your own phone, you feel less satisfied with like your experience. You have worse, more negative emotions when you're the one on your phone. So
Right.
just knowing those facts is a start.
Yeah.
Um, but then also, I think one of the things that I think many of the conversations I've had with folks over the last few years, everybody says, like, I'm not maybe in these words, but I'm lonely. I'm not feeling connected to people. Like, what is going on with all this connection? We're feeling so disconnected. And part of that is because this tool is like popping up and ruining our ability to connect with each other.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily a strategy, but just knowing that if we want stronger connections with other people, then this little rectangular object is reducing that. And so we just sort of have to be intentional and not pull out our phones.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a really good point. So again, it's about like how what is important for having a good life and for creating good relationships. And one of the things there is, of course, to spend quality time with each other where we really like see each other and we really talk to each other. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I really think this one is quite. I think this one is really obvious. I think when you're at the restaurants, I was out in a restaurant just a couple of weeks ago, and then I was talking with the friend that I was with about another couple sitting there where both were having their phones on the restaurant, looking
Yeah.
at their phones, and it's just it's really struck me then as something that it really doesn't seem very healthy when you're actually having a night out with your partner.
I know. We see it all the time too. On the positive side, I will say that when I was kind of testing out the strategies in this book and I didn't have my phone out at all, other people around you kind of start to mimic that behavior. So they see that you're not on your phone and they're like, oh, maybe it would be like rude of me to pull out my phone and this person's just like staring at me.
Yeah, exactly.
So you
You
can kind of affect other people's behavior too.
Exactly. So you say it out loud, like, "Oh, I'm putting my phone away now, everybody."
Yeah.
And
Or,
then-
I mean, in my case, I just didn't bring
yeah,
it out at all. So if they wanted to
yeah,
bring out their
exactly.
phone, I would just sort of be sitting there awkwardly, which does sometimes happen. But people also, like, human nature is to treat others as they treat you. And
Yeah,
so when you're not, phubbing them or phone snubbing them by pulling out your phone, then they're less likely to do it to you. And it's kind of like that was one of my favorite things that I learned in this is that not only can I affect my behavior, but I can affect others without even like nagging them to put their phones away.
yeah, that is great. I think this one is really really powerful. I think when it comes to smartphone, it seems that way. That really having kind of a rule that if you're spending time with your family and friends, that you just don't use your phone during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And then, even if you just try it out once, like the cool thing is that after you do it a few times, you're like, oh my God, these interactions were so much better.
Yeah,
And then you want to do it more. Like I was just sort of a normal person before I wrote this book. And now it's like impossible to get a hold of me on my phone because I don't want it near me at any moment.
yeah, exactly. And then, as you just said, like, and then if people know that, or when you're not using your phone, and then others get used to it, then that is also create ripple effect of
Mhm.
in their lives as well, and then it all gets better, kind of.
Absolutely. It's like when you know that you can text someone and they're going to respond right away, then you get texted all the time. And so it's sort of just like it does. People get used to being like, oh, yeah, maybe I can't reach everyone at every moment and they don't have to reach me at every moment. And that's very liberating.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, having real quality time with people, I mean, that is one of the best things we can have, right? It's just
Yeah.
I mean, and then having your phone there, it's just big it's just a big distractor.
Yeah, absolutely. That quality time, that's like the best thing we can do for our well-being. And then another cool thing I discovered while researching for this book is that even having quality time with strangers is good for our well-being. And right now we
Right.
just like walk down the street with our phones in front of our face or like sit on the train and we aren't having these conversations with strangers anymore. And that's like sort of limiting our ability to just sort of be happy as we walk around the world.
Yeah, here in Sweden we don't talk to strangers anyway, so now it's like zero. So
Oh,
so now it's even less. But yeah, but I agree. It's I mean talking to somebody when they're on their phone is something that you just don't do, right? If there's somebody sitting next to you and they're using their phone, it's a lot harder to start a conversation about something.
yeah, and if we're not on our phones, there are I am not I don't know the culture in Sweden, but here like I make an effort to have a conversation with the cashier, sort of like they're not on their phone, they're ringing me up, they're forced into a conversation with me,
Yeah, 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 exactly.
or something like that, or like the barista at the coffee shop or whatever. There's these opportunities that we're kind of missing out on.
Yeah, it's I like that as well a lot. But it's not that I mean it's not I think it's more common in the US than it is in Sweden, but
But
it's I love it as well. It's great. I had also another thing about this that I had a problem with was when I was always using my phone just before I was going to bed, and then I was lying there, scrolling for perhaps half an hour, and then I got like 30 minutes up to an hour less sleep like every
Mhm,
night.
mhm.
That is something also that really affects our well-being, I think. That I mean sleep is so essential for health and well-being and mental health and everything. So that is, I think, another really important one. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely research that shows that I think it's the blue light emitted from our phones and other devices can harm our sleep.
Yeah.
Um, I know there's one product creator, a guy who's created these little like door hangers for smartphones so that when you go into your
Oh,
bedroom, you like put your phone, it's like a reminder to put your phone in there and not take the phone into the room with you, which I thought was a really
right.
clever way of just, because really we just need these reminders. If we don't want to do a behavior, our phones suck us in and we forget. But if we have these little reminders to be like, hey, this is what you want to do to improve your life,
Yeah.
how do we make it easier for you to do that?
Yeah. Well, that sounds great.
Yeah,
It
it's a
re-
cool idea.
yeah, it really is. I mean, it really feels like it's about, being conscious about this and taking steps in the direction that you want.
Yeah, so much of it is just with anything happiness, well-being, health related. Like I think people understand that if you want to build muscle or lose weight, you have to change your diet or exercise. But in the mental health space, people don't think of it like that. They're like, oh, I should just like be happy. No, it takes like basically
Yeah.
effort and practice. But that's the cool thing too, because if you put the effort in and practice the skills and take the steps, you can be happier. It's like kind of amazing. So it's not a bad thing.
Exactly. You can really affect how you feel.
Yeah, it's
It just
kind of
takes a lot of work.
crazy. It takes a lot of work. Just like, if I wanted to be, really muscular, it would take a lot of work. But it's
Yeah.
just a matter of, if you want to do it and you set aside the time to do it, it can be done, which is what really got me excited about psychology and interested in this whole field.
For sure, and then also using evidence-based interventions has been shown to work is also something that helps us to more reliably affect how we feel as
Yeah,
well, I think.
exactly. Yeah, we definitely want to do the things that have been researched and proven to work.
Right. So about that, we were talking a little bit about this before we got started. What interventions do you think is good when it comes to increasing well-being that people listening could try out if they wanted to try out something for the first time or beginners?
Yeah, great question. So I know I'm going to change my answer from the one I gave you earlier.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So if your question is like, what should people try out first? I would
yeah.
say gratitude is probably the easiest, fastest acting strategy people can use. Like if you just, take a moment every day or once a week or not even that often to think of three things you're grateful for, or to comment to someone else and share your gratitude with someone in your life, that not only helps you do the whole gratitude thing, but also helps you build a stronger relationship with that person or other people. That would be my absolute top suggestion if people want to try something fairly easy, fairly effective. Like everybody loves gratitude. On the flip side, mindfulness I know is really popular these days. but it's really hard. And so
Yeah.
doing mindfulness and doing it well, and so that it actually works for folks, I consider that to be more of an advanced technique.
I think also mindfulness is quite, it's hard. I mean, it's hard to know what to do also, I think. I mean,
Yes.
it takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of learning before you can harness the profits of doing mindfulness, I think. I mean, or at least in my case, that is something that for me, that is something that I've found.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so hard. And then there's research that suggests that we're not all equally good at it. And if the whole thing is to be aware, present in your body, and if we can't manage the emotions that come up when we do that, it can actually be kind of harmful. So we have to be really careful with, which strategy. I have to be careful about which strategies I suggest and to who and in what contexts.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, but so expressing your gratitude would be your
Yeah.
number one choice then, and also expressing gratitude with a friend or family member or somebody else. But do you know about the science of gratitude? How big the effect sizes are, and like how much research has been done on gratitude?
I know. I don't know the effect sizes. In general, there's a project I work on called Greater Good in Action. If people want to Google it, there's a ton of sort of positive psychology activities on that website. It's great, and we're trying to figure out like exactly how much bigger the impact of gratitude is compared to mindfulness, compared to kindness, compared to all the different things in this space. So I don't have a great answer at the moment, but know that we're working on it.
Right. So it's Greater Good in Action. Is that so? That is a web page where you look at different interventions and.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's basically all of the positive psychology research-based interventions that have been shown to improve well-being or social connection or positive outcomes, broadly speaking. And they're all distilled into these little activities. So you just like click on one and you're like, I'm going to try learning how to see silver linings today, or, practicing
Ah,
kindness. It's just like a nice little introduction to this stuff if this is all new.
interesting, and it's really easy to use, also, right? Or
It's
seems
ideally
sounds like
we're
it.
trying to make it even easier to use, so it'll that website's going to keep improving.
Okay, okay. The easiest website to use when you're that's yeah. That sounds great. All right. So about gratitude, then, do you? Because I was also been told that it's also about, it's not only to like list what you're thankful for, it's also to think about like why it happened.
Hmm.
Do you know
Yeah,
about that as well, and why why you need to do that, or.
I don't really know. I know that like this research kind of borders and or crosses over with like the emotion regulation research or the
Yeah.
cognitive reappraisal research, where it's like, you know, in order to think a situation is better or to reframe a situation, you think of the things you're grateful for. You think of, what you learned, why this happened, all these things. And so I'm not familiar with that in terms of the gratitude space, but
Yeah.
certainly all of this stuff seems to be helpful. But do share what you know about this.
Yeah, actually, I don't know more than I don't know more than that I read that you're supposed to do it. So that's what I
Okay.
was. So I'm not really sure why. I mean, listing what you're grateful for is something that you hear everywhere, and at some places you also hear about this, that you're supposed to like list why it happens. For example, now I'm blanking on the name. The guy who got the Nobel laureate. Yeah, Kahneman.
Uh-huh.
So I saw Kahneman, for example. He has like a quote about that where he says that you're supposed to both list what you're grateful for, but also write why it happened.
Oh, that's great. I actually have
Yeah,
not heard of that. I know that there are different types of gratitude. So like if you're expressing gratitude to another person, it's I think more effective if you focus on them. Like instead of being like, I'm grateful that you did this thing for me, or like I feel good when I'm around you. It's better to focus on them and be like, I'm grateful that like you're a good person, or that,
Yeah.
and it's kind of hard to make that distinction. But if we're focusing on them, that's like the gratitude that's supposed to be the most beneficial.
Yeah. And have you seen that like happen in real life?
I I think I felt it in real life.
Yeah.
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 Because if you're
I
always, in general, self-focus doesn't tend to be very good for our well-being. So however we can focus on others, it's just a better strategy.
Yeah. I've seen like this like I was at a workshop where people were supposed to give each other positive feedback, and that
Mm,
was really powerful. I mean, that really affected how people felt. I mean, it was quite obvious, at least in that in that particular yeah, in that particular when that happened. But yeah,
that's
it's
awesome.
yeah, it is. It's quite it's quite cool. So yeah, yeah. Do you have? No, I'm just interested in learning more about this. Do you have any? So gratitude. That is one. Like, and I think that's probably the most famous one, also for positive psychology. But if you would mention like another one, like a second one, what one would that be then that you like?
Within positive psychology, or just
Or yeah, or every or whatever you want that can affect well-being, kind of.
yeah. So the one we talked about a little bit before we started recording, it was just getting out in nature and like being in the sun and around the trees and even touching the soil. All of those things have been shown to improve health and well-being, and so that's what I'm kind of trying these days.
Yeah.
But part of the reason why I'm trying it is because of this effect, this thing called hedonic adaptation, which is basically the idea that if we have a boost in happiness, we kind of will eventually return to our emotional baseline. And so if we keep practicing something like gratitude over and over and over and over again, over time, it's likely to have less of an impact on our happiness. So one of the best things we can do is try a bunch of different things and keep like do kindness one day and gratitude another day and mindfulness another day, and have a positive social interaction the next day, or get outside. And so because I've been in the positive psychology space so long, I'm finding that these positive activities are like, I think I'm overall happier than I was a decade ago, but I'm needing to try other things. And so I've been venturing into other areas like the health space, where it's like getting outside is actually really good. And there's even research that shows that putting your hands in the soil can help reduce depression. And so I'm like, I got to just try all this stuff and see what it does.
Right. Yeah. So try it out, see what happens. But I think for most of us, or me too. I mean, it's quite obvious, or the feeling that you get from being in nature is quite astonishing. I think, like being out by just looking at the trees and walking around, and even though you're perhaps talking with a friend or doing something else out in nature, it really has an effect. I think, or at least
I
from an anecdotal
I
from point of
totally
view.
agree. And like there's like research in the well-being space that is true. But then also just vitamin D from the sun's rays is good for health. So maybe that's why. Or, the fresh air, then we're not breathing in all the kind of like junk that's in our homes. Or there's just like all these reasons why that might be true. And there's so many of them that just being outside, it's like they're all combining, and it's just such a great tool.
Yeah, true. I tend to be like, from an evolutionary perspective, I mean, it's kind of the environment that we, some sort of being outside. I mean, it doesn't have to be like in Sweden or the US, but I mean, we have spent a lot of time outside in the history of our species. So
Yeah, and right now it's kind of unnatural that we're inside all the time staring at these square screens.
yeah, yeah, that's true. Actually, like before, we were outside and like really paying attention, perhaps to each other and to nature and to everything out there. And now we spend perhaps 12 hours looking at screens instead, sitting still. It's quite. I mean, it's quite a it's quite a
It is.
difference.
And maybe that's why being outside, like you can actually tangibly feel how good it is, because maybe if we did it all the time, we wouldn't notice. But because it's kind of rare for most of us, it's probably like such an important strategy.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, I'm also thinking about like the hedonic adaptation.
Hmm.
I was thinking about these because I've also heard about the hedonic adaptation that you kind of you get back to the happiness level that you had before.
Hmm.
But I was thinking about like all these monks and who like practice self-compassion meditation or they practice other kinds of meditation. And as from my understanding, that they've seen this big change in their brains and probably also in their how they feel like subjectively. So it also seems like it's something that we can change, but that takes practice.
Yes, absolutely. And it's hard to really make that distinction between, like, yes, the brain is plastic and it can be changed. And there's definitely research to show that, these skills can be learned and the brain can start to kind of do these, like maybe people who practice gratitude, let's say every day for a year, then it becomes kind of automatic and your brain kind of does it without even
Yeah.
having to really work. And so that can lead to long-term increases in happiness just because you're not having to exert the effort to do this happiness producing thing.
Right.
And it's interesting that that is true while at the same time hedonic adaptation is true, where it's like, okay, this skill that you learned is having less of an effect. But so that's sort of like a matter of building the skills, building new skills, and then like, it's like this whole little like whirlwind of different strategies.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Great. So I was thinking perhaps we could get back also to the smartphones.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean you've written this book and you've been thinking about this quite a lot. And I was wondering, what have you learned about smartphones and perhaps how to handle smartphones? Like, what are the biggest insights that you have gotten?
Hmm. Good question. Um, I think that they're not all good or all bad. Like, I think mostly we've been sort of talking about how to, put your phone down, get outside, all these things, which, I think we sort of intuitively know. But the neat thing that I worked on in this book is figuring out how we can actually use technology for good and to promote well-being. So like maybe we don't have to completely get off our phones. Maybe we just need to use it in a different way. So like, for example, we can use our phones to practice things like gratitude. And it's easier for me to just, text someone or call them and be like, hey, like, thanks for this thing versus, maybe I won't see them in person for a week or a month or a year. And our phones can actually be tools to promote well-being in addition to like us managing the negative parts of them.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Exactly. So you can use the phone, and again, that perhaps that is something that you have to choose. So you have to kind of.
Yeah.
I'm going to use my cell phone to contact my friends and family and do all these positive things. Then.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sort of a matter of knowing what those right actions are, right? So like since my training and my background is in positive psychology and I was working in technology and I'm like, okay, well, how do we apply the science of positive psychology to the way we interact with our phones? Because it should apply there just like it applies anywhere else. So it's like, how do we be kind on our phones? Maybe we don't get in fights over politics on our social media, or maybe we, join an organization that does something good for the world that we can only join online. We couldn't actually do that in real life. So there's all these opportunities now to promote well-being using technology to promote our own well-being. And for some reason, I mean, I know people are making use of them, but I don't think we realize that we could actually improve our well-being using technology instead of just harping on it for all its negatives, which it does obviously have negatives.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really good point. So it's again about this, like trying to reduce the negative stuff and trying to increase like the positive things that you can do with your phone as well.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and perhaps like, yeah, reducing the amount of time you spend on applications that doesn't really have a good effect on your life, or have a detrimental or bad effect on your life.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So like another tip I include somewhere, I think it must be in the book, is to just like move all of the apps that like you don't think are so good for you to like a back screen, or like put them in grayscale or something so that they're hard to find, or take them off your phone entirely so that you have to only use them when you're on your computer. Like I don't personally have Facebook on my phone, which I know people think is crazy, but
Yeah,
I get sucked into it, and so I'm just like creating this wall.
yeah.
But I do have, like a bunch of positive psychology apps on my phone. I have a mindfulness app, and I have things that I think are good for my well-being, so that hopefully my phone isn't a bad thing anymore.
Exactly, and then it's also, I think, also perhaps to, because I myself, I really think that it's so much easier to get into Instagram, Facebook. I mean, it kind of draws you in, but
Hmm.
I'm not drawn in the same way to like my meditations apps. It's more of a
Yeah.
that is more of a a conscious decision that I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes every day, and then that is then I go and I like consciously, it's a conscious decision instead of these unconscious decisions where it comes to the other applications.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is like somewhat in the addiction space where it requires a conscious decision. I don't think we're just going to stop using our phones without effort.
No, I think that is very true. So it's about removing time and removing applications, or at least hiding them so it's harder to find them, and then it's about like getting these positive applications. Do you have any suggestions about like different applications or other things that you can use on your phone to increase well-being?
I mentioned Greater Good in Action, which is a website. It's not an app, but you can use it on your phone.
Yeah.
Um, I forget the name of the mindfulness. The what's the super popular mindfulness app? I definitely
Can it be Insight Timer or Headspace or
Headspace.
Calm?
I really like
Headspace, yeah.
Headspace, and you can keep like listening to the free mindfulness dailies over and over again. I also use YouTube for their mindfulness meditation videos.
Yeah, me too. I think YouTube is also great. And the first, like the 10 introduction episodes of Headspace, I think are excellent. I think it's kind of
I agree.
the best episodes if you want to start or you want to try out meditation. They're so pedagogical, and also I think the duration of them also is great. And
I
yeah,
agree. I was really impressed. I sort of fought doing it for a long time and was like, this is actually really well done. And having worked on a lot of apps like this myself, I appreciate just how well done they are.
yeah, for sure. Um, so is there anything else that you learned from writing this book, or something else that you would like to share about the book?
I think the only thing that we didn't really super touch on was there's a whole section kind of on authenticity and being your true self, which is something that I think is becoming more difficult for us in the technology age, because we have these online personas that we have to maintain that have to be perfect. And then some of that translates into our regular lives where we're like presenting this false version of ourselves. And that's really not very good for well-being, not very good for self-worth. And so it's sort of a matter of getting back to authenticity and trying to express more vulnerability, more of our flaws, more just like genuine opinions with people in real life, and maybe online, maybe just like specific people who we want to connect with online, maybe not like the whole world. But that's, I think, another really important key of kind of being well in the technology age.
Right. Just so I understand, so that we are like there, that we have this facade in our social media accounts, and that is something that also affects our non non-internet, non-app life.
Yes,
Kind of.
absolutely.
Right. And then that is something that is, yeah, exactly, it's important to work with. That is something that can be really hard, right, though, right? Like
Of course.
really really being authentic and really expressing and being vulnerable.
Yeah, it is. And so like in the course of this book, I have sort of these different strategies and different steps to follow. This is the near the last one because it is absolutely one of the harder things.
Yeah.
Just internet or no internet, showing our true selves and being vulnerable with people is really hard. But because we're struggling so much with loneliness and building social connections, this is like a key ingredient of what actually leads to strong human connections. And if we're not ourselves with people, they have no opportunity to like love us for who we really are. And we feel that. And so it's
Yeah.
like a really deep issue that is not necessarily easy to fix, but something that we need to start working on.
Very true. Do you have any recommendations of strategies or techniques or anything to help us be more authentic? And
Yeah, I mean, one of the examples I give in the book that I think is just like a nice sort of easy lead in is when I was, I don't know, young-ish. I was really like nervous about the music I listened to, which wasn't cool among my social group. And this one time I was just like, you know what? Like, I'm gonna put on the music that I like, even if people make fun of me. Like, this is me. And I did it, and people were fine with it. They sort of just like appreciated me sharing that authentic version of myself with them. And I know that's a tiny example, but there's so many things that we could do to just show like a little bit more of ourselves. And then the more you do that, the easier it gets to show like the really scary parts of yourself with the people that you care about who, reacted well to the littler things.
exactly. So it's good to try it out with people who you are comfortable with, and then
Yes. Yeah,
try it out with
and
people.
pretty much only with people you're comfortable with until, because you don't necessarily need to like share your deepest darkest secrets with someone you just met. That's not required. But if you want to build stronger relationships with the people who you care about, it requires authenticity and vulnerability, which I don't know if we like really know that or do that anymore.
That's true. Do you think that that is also like one of the, or I'll rephrase the question, like how important do you think that is for a good life and for well-being, to be authentic and to express our what we really think?
I think for interpersonal relationships, it is super super important for us to be ourselves and to share our real thoughts and feelings and be honest and like the good stuff and the bad stuff. And I think you can maybe have a happy life without it, but it's just the deeper you go, it just like creates this whole other type of intimacy and connection that I think many people may not even have ever experienced now because we're so used to putting on this show.
Yeah, exactly. And all, as you said, these smartphone or all these social media, the social media pressure of the perfect life doesn't really make it easier,
It
probably.
it certainly doesn't, and like with our friends and our family, and even like with work, our online persona. People can Google us, and it could affect whether or not we get a job. So I can certainly understand why people are not wanting to put their, I don't know if I would necessarily recommend putting all your deepest, darkest secrets in a blog online, but certainly sharing it with the people who you're close to is key.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. It's interesting though when you look at videos or also listening to audio or podcast. It's really interesting what happens when people are really genuine. I mean, it really gets right into you in a way.
Yeah, and it might be similar to like why when we're outside it just feels so good, but when people are authentic and share that trueness, I think we're thirsty for it and we just really enjoy it so much now because it's so rare.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. Tchiki, it's been really really great talking to you. Is there anything else that you want to mention about your book or anything before we hang up?
I guess I'll just say you can get my book on Amazon or Barnes and Noble and all the bookstores that are online. And my website, berkeleywellbeing.com, also has lots of articles and activities and tools and things that can be helpful to folks who are interested in increasing happiness.
For sure, and also checking out that Greater Good in Action site as well.
Yes,
That
highly
other one
recommended.
that other one that you mentioned. Yeah, so the book was called, or So your book is called Outsmart Your Smartphone, Conscious Tech Habits for Finding Happiness, Balance, and Connections in Real Life. So I really suggest that if you find this interesting, it's something that you should go and check out for sure. So Tchiki, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure talking to you about this. So big thank you.
Thank you. It's been lots of fun.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Hey friend, hope you enjoyed the episode. I really need your help. I'm trying to get my podcast out there. So I was wondering if you could help me by leaving a positive rating and a review on your Apple device or the podcast player that you're using. That really helps getting the show more visible on iTunes and other players. And if you don't know how it's done, then YouTube has great videos, so you can search there. All right, that's it. Take care.